The files are still there. That is where this story ends. And that is where it begins. 701 case folders sitting in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Open to anyone who wants to look. Unresolved since 1969. Officially closed. Officially unexplained. But the Air Force said they found nothing. Therefore, the question is still waiting. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, 1968. A letter sits on a desk in a small office. The man who wrote it is an astronomer, not a believer, not a crank, a scientist with a doctorate from the University of Chicago who has spent 20 years reading every report that came through this office. He sets the letter down and does not move for a moment. He thinks, I have been in this room too long to pretend anymore. His name is J. Allen Hynek, and the letter in front of him charges the program he has served for 2 decades with using statistical methods that are nothing less than a travesty. He pushes it across the desk toward the director. The director reads the first paragraph. He sets it down. He does not look up. 1 year later, the program is closed. 701 cases remain unexplained. They remain that way today. Part 1. What it was supposed to be. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. March 1952. A new office. A new sign on the door. Project Blue Book. The mission sounds simple. Collect UFO reports from civilians and military personnel. Analyze them. Determine whether any pose a threat to national security. But the Air Force already had a position, and the position was, there is nothing to see here. Project Sign had come before Blue Book. In December 1947, some of the officers and analysts who worked it had concluded that the objects were real, structured, potentially not from anywhere on Earth. They wrote it down. They called it the estimate of the situation. They sent it up the chain of command, but senior leadership rejected the conclusion. Therefore, the copies were burned. Every one. Project Grudge replaced Sign in 1949 with a different mandate. The goal was no longer to investigate. The goal was to explain away, close the cases, reduce the reports, make the numbers look manageable. But the reports kept coming. Therefore, in March 1952, the Air Force launched Blue Book, headquartered at Wright-Patterson. Small staff, low budget. A part-time scientific consultant named J. Allen Hynek, and a mission that said one thing in public and meant something else entirely. Part 2. The Summer That Changed Everything. Washington, D.C., July 1952. A radar room. Night. The operator leans toward the screen. He thinks that should not be there. The blip is moving, not like an aircraft moves. It appears, vanishes, reappears. Then 3 more join it, then 6. Radar operators at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base are tracking unknown objects moving through restricted airspace above the United States Capitol. Interceptor jets are scrambled. The pilots go up, but every time the jets approach, the objects vanish. Therefore, when the jets turn back, the objects return. This happens across multiple weekends. The airspace above Congress and the White House is being penetrated by something that American military aviation cannot intercept, identify, or explain. The Air Force holds its largest press conference since World War II. The explanation offered is temperature inversions in the atmosphere, causing radar anomalies. But the radar operators who were present reject this explanation. Every one of them, for the rest of their lives. Therefore, the question does not close. It opens wider. Part 3. The man they hired to make it go away. J. Allen Hynek is sitting in a lecture hall at Northwestern University in 1947 when an Air Force officer walks in and asks if he would consult on a classified project. He says yes. He is a skeptic. He thinks flying saucers are nonsense. He thinks witnesses are confused. Therefore, he is exactly what the Air Force wants. For the first years, he does his job well. He reads the reports. He finds the conventional explanations: planets, stars, weather balloons, aircraft reflections. He closes the cases. But then, something starts to happen. He reads a case that does not close. A radar tracking corroborated by 3 separate visual observers. He drives to the location. He meets the witnesses. He looks at the instruments. He thinks this one is real and I cannot explain it. He puts it in the unidentified pile. But another one comes, and another. He keeps his doubts to himself. He is a consultant. He is not running the program. Therefore, he files his reports and goes back to his university. But the pile of unexplained cases keeps growing. Part 4. The Method That Was Not Science. Wright, Patterson, Ohio, 1954. A new director takes over Blue Book. He develops a procedure. A case file that was listed as possible balloon becomes probable balloon. A case listed as probable balloon becomes confirmed balloon. No additional investigation is required. No new evidence is added to the file. The classification simply changes. Therefore, the percentage of unexplained cases falls. The Air Force press releases sound better. The numbers look manageable. But the cases that resist this reclassification do not disappear. They sit in the unidentified pile. Hynek sees this. He walks into the director's office one afternoon and stands in the doorway. He says these cases are being closed without investigation. The director looks at him. He says the cases are closed. Hynek goes back to his office. He stares at the wall for a long time. He thinks I have been helping them do this, but he stays. For 15 more years, he stays, because he believes that somewhere in the files is something that matters. Therefore, he keeps reading, and the pile keeps growing. Part 5. 3 cases that would not close. Lubbock, Texas. 1951. 3 professors from Texas Tech are sitting outside on a warm evening when a V formation of lights crosses the sky above them. They are educated observers. They are not excitable, but the lights do not match any known aircraft formation. Therefore, they report it. A student named Carl Hart photographs the lights. The photographs are examined. No explanation is found. The file goes to Blue Book. It sits in the unidentified pile. Socorro, New Mexico, April 1964. A police officer named Lonnie Zamora is driving on a road south of town when he sees a flame descending near a dynamite shack. He turns off the road. He comes over a ridge. He sees something on the ground. It is egg-shaped. There are 2 figures near it. They are not large. They are wearing white. He reaches for his radio. The object rises. It makes a sound. It moves southwest and accelerates and is gone. Hynek personally investigates the case. He finds physical trace evidence on the ground. He interviews Zamora. He looks at the officer's face and listens to his voice. He thinks this man is not lying. The file goes to Blue Book. Unidentified. The RB-47. July 1957. A United States Air Force electronic reconnaissance aircraft is flying across the southern states when something begins following it. The object is tracked on the aircraft's own radar. It is detected on the aircraft's electronic intelligence systems. It is observed visually by multiple crew members. It is tracked simultaneously by ground radar stations. The object disappears from all sensors at the same moment. It reappears in different positions. Blue Book investigates the case for 3 years. The final classification is unidentified. Physicist James McDonald later calls it one of the most scientifically significant UAP cases in the historical record. But the file sits in the pile. Unresolved. Part 6. The Robertson Panel and what it actually said. Washington, D.C., January 1953. A conference room. 5 scientists. Classified. The CIA has assembled a panel to advise on the UFO question. It is headed by physicist H.P. Robertson of the California Institute of Technology. Hynek is the one astronomer in the room. The panel reviews the evidence Blue Book has collected. Photographs, film footage, radar cases. But the panel does not ask what these objects are. It asks what to do about public interest in them. The recommendation is a program of active debunking. Work with television and motion picture producers to present UFOs in a normalizing context. Train civilian reporting networks, not to investigate anomalies, but to reduce the number of reports. The goal is not truth. The goal is reduction of public interest. Therefore, this becomes the policy framework inside which Blue Book operates for the rest of its existence. The Robertson Panel report is classified. It is not declassified until 1975. Therefore, for 22 years, the public has no idea that the program investigating UFOs is operating under a mandate to make people stop asking about them. Part 7. The letter. Wright, Patterson, Ohio, 1968. Hynek sits at his desk. He has been in this room for 20 years. He has read 12,000 cases. He has written thousands of assessments. He has classified planets as stars and weather balloons as aircraft, and done it because that was the job. But something changed after Socorro. Something changed after the RB-47. Something changed after he started counting the cases that could not be closed, no matter how the classification changed. He picks up a pen. The letter he writes charges Blue Book with 3 things. It lacks trained personnel necessary for the job. It has conducted virtually no dialogue with the outside scientific world. Its statistical methods are nothing less than a travesty. He is not writing this as a UFO believer. He is writing it as a scientist, and the charges are specific and documentable. He sends the letter. The Air Force does not act on it, but the Condon report is coming, and the Condon report will give the Air Force what it needs. Part 8. The report that was written before it was written. University of Colorado, Boulder, 1966. The Air Force has commissioned an independent scientific study of UFOs. It is headed by physicist Edward Condon. It has a staff of researchers, but a committee member named David Saunders finds a memorandum. It was written by the project manager Robert Lowe before the study began. It lays out what conclusion the committee needs to reach. It describes how the appearance of objectivity can be maintained, while the investigation produces a predetermined result. Saunders brings the memorandum to his colleagues. Therefore, he is dismissed from the project. A second staff member resigns in protest. The memorandum becomes public. The circumstances of the dismissals are reported in the press, but the Condon report is published anyway. It concludes that further study of UFOs is unlikely to advance science. The Air Force has what it needs. December 17, 1969. Project Blue Book is officially terminated. The 701 unidentified cases remain in the files. The files go to the National Archives in 1976. They are available to anyone who asks. Part 9. What Hynek built after. Evanston, Illinois, 1973. Hynek is sitting in a new office. He is no longer a consultant to the Air Force. He is building something of his own. The Center for UFO Studies, a scientific organization, an advisory board drawn from academia, standardized investigation protocols, peer-reviewed publication of findings. He is trying to do what he spent 20 years telling Blue Book to do. He develops a classification system. Close encounter of the first kind. Close encounter of the second kind. Close encounter of the third kind. That system is still used today. A filmmaker named Steven Spielberg uses it as the basis for a 1977 film. Hynek appears in a brief cameo. He dies in 1986. His files go to the Center for UFO Studies. The organization he built is still operating, and the classification system he developed in frustration at a program that would not take the questions seriously is now the standard language for describing encounters with the unexplained. Part 10. What came after Blue Book? The Air Force said in 1969 that no further investigation was warranted. But in 2007, the Pentagon began a classified program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Budget $22 million annually. It ran until 2012. Its director resigned in 2017 and stated publicly that the program had documented objects with flight characteristics that could not be explained by any known human technology. In 2020, the Department of Defense officially confirmed the authenticity of 3 videos taken by Navy pilots showing encounters with unidentified aerial vehicles. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released an assessment acknowledging 144 encounters that military analysts could not explain. In 2023, a former intelligence officer testified before the United States Senate under oath that the government had been in possession of non-human craft and biological material for decades. The senators on the committee stated publicly that they found the witnesses credible, but the Air Force said in 1969 that they found nothing. Therefore, the question was supposed to be closed. It was not closed. It was never closed. Part 11. The files are still there. The 701 unidentified cases from Project Blue Book are in the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. They have been there since 1976. They are open to the public. Any researcher can request them. Thousands have. The cases are as unresolved today as they were when they were filed. Hynek called the statistical methods a travesty. The Robertson Panel said the goal was reduction of public interest. The Lowe Memorandum showed the Condon conclusion was predetermined, and 701 cases could not be explained by a program that ran for 17 years with a full budget and the full resources of the United States Air Force. That is not a number someone invented. That is the official number from the official files in the official archive. The program that studied UAPs for 17 years and said it found nothing, left behind 701 things it could not explain. Hynek left behind the classification system every serious researcher uses today. And the files left behind are available in Washington to anyone who wants to know what 701 unexplained things look like. When a government puts them in a folder and calls the question closed, they are still waiting. Open, unresolved. Go look. Part 12. The witnesses who never stopped talking. The people who reported to Project Blue Book were not, in the main, unstable. They were pilots. Commercial airline captains with thousands of hours of flight time. Military officers trained to observe and report accurately. Radar operators who spent their careers interpreting screens. Scientists, engineers, law enforcement officers. These are not people who confuse Venus with a structured craft that hovers for 6 minutes and then accelerates to a speed that no aircraft in the American inventory could match. But when they filed their reports, the reports went into a system designed to reduce the volume of incoming cases, not to investigate them. A commercial airline pilot who reported a structured object at cruise altitude received back in some cases a form letter explaining that his sighting was likely a weather balloon. The pilot sets the letter down. He stares at it for a long time. He thinks I have been flying for 20 years. I know what a weather balloon looks like, but the case is closed. Therefore, the question dies inside the filing system, and the pilot never reports again. That is the cost the program could not measure. The credible witnesses who saw something, reported it honestly, received a dismissive response, and went silent. The cases that never reached the files, because the people who saw them learned early that the system was not listening. Edward Ruppelt, the one director of Blue Book who ran it with genuine openness, wrote about this in his memoir published in 1956. He described the pressure to close cases regardless of the evidence. He described witnesses who came forward with detailed accounts and received explanations that did not fit what they had observed. He left the Air Force in 1953. The open-minded approach he had brought to the program did not outlast his departure. But his book is still available. His testimony is still on the record, and the witnesses he believed are still in the files. Part 13. The Legacy in Current Investigation. Project Blue Book ended in December 1969. The gap between that closure and the next acknowledged investigation is 48 years. 48 years during which the official American government position was that no investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena was being conducted, because none was warranted. But the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program ran from 2007 to 2012 inside the Defense Intelligence Agency. Classified, funded, active. Therefore, the gap was not actually a gap. It was just invisible. When the Pentagon confirmed the program's existence in December 2017, and when the Navy videos were confirmed authentic in 2020, and when the Senate hearings of 2023 produced sworn testimony that left committee members from both parties publicly stating the witnesses were credible, the question that Project Blue Book was supposed to close in 1969 was still open. It had never been closed, but the methodology that Hynek developed inside Blue Book, the classification system, the structured witness interview protocols, the insistence on physical evidence where it exists, all of it became the foundation for every serious subsequent investigation. The Center for UFO Studies that Hynek built in 1973 trained a generation of researchers who applied scientific rigor to a subject that official science had refused to take seriously. Several of those researchers later consulted with the government programs that came after Blue Book. Therefore, the program that failed to investigate properly still shaped how investigation was eventually done correctly. That is the honest accounting of what 17 years of Blue Book produced. Not nothing, not the answers, but the tools and the record, and the 701 cases that prove the question was never as closed as the Air Force wanted anyone to believe. Part 14. The question that outlasted the program. Hynek is standing outside the Condon Report press conference in 1969. He has just listened to the conclusions. He knows what the Lowe memorandum said. He knows the conclusion was reached before the research was done. A reporter comes up to him and asks what he thinks. He looks at the reporter for a moment. He says, "I think some of these cases are genuine unknowns." He says, "I think the question deserves better than it has received." He says, "That is all I will say today." He gets in a car. He goes back to his university, and he starts planning the Center for UFO Studies. The Air Force closes Blue Book that December. The files go into storage. The office at Wright-Patterson is cleared out. The staff disperses, but the cases in the unidentified pile do not go anywhere. They sit in boxes. They travel to Washington. They go on the shelves at the National Archives. And 20 years later, 50 years later, the people who come to look at them find the same thing that Hynek found. Cases that resist explanation. Witnesses whose accounts are coherent and detailed and corroborated. Radar trackings that cannot be attributed to known phenomena. Physical trace evidence from close encounter cases that was documented, photographed, and then filed away. The program said it found nothing, but nothing does not fill 701 folders. The folders are in Washington. They have always been in Washington. Go look. Part 15. The Ruppelt Years and What They Proved. Wright Patterson, Ohio, 1952. Captain Edward Ruppelt walks into the Blue Book office for the first time and looks at the filing system. He thinks this is a mess. The cases are inconsistently categorized. The reporting forms are different from base to base. Witnesses are interviewed with different questions, so the answers cannot be compared across cases. There is no standardized methodology. He thinks if we are going to do this, we should do it properly. He invents a term, unidentified flying object. Not flying saucer, not spaceship, not anomaly. A neutral, descriptive, scientific term. He designs a standardized reporting form. Every witness answers the same questions. Every case is documented the same way. He builds the first serious investigation infrastructure that Blue Book ever has. Under his direction, the program investigates the Washington, D.C. sightings of 1952. He interviews the radar operators. He interviews the pilots who went up to intercept. He reviews the data. He does not find a satisfying conventional explanation. Therefore, he writes that up honestly in the case file. He also investigates the Lubbock Lights, the B-57 encounter over the Gulf of Mexico, the Nash and Fortenberry sighting over Virginia, commercial airline pilots, clear sky, structured formation, moving faster than anything in American aviation. He does not close cases because they are inconvenient. He leaves them open because the evidence does not resolve them. But in 1953, Ruppelt leaves the Air Force. The open-minded approach leaves with him. Therefore, the program he built to investigate properly becomes a program built to dismiss efficiently. And the cases that Ruppelt left open are reclassified by his successors, using the method that turns possible into probable into certain, without adding a single piece of new evidence. Part 16. The scientists who disagreed. The American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is not a fringe organization. It is the professional body for aerospace engineering in the United States. When the Condon Report was published in 1968, the Institute issued a formal statement. It noted that the Condon Report had not adequately dealt with 23% of the cases it reviewed. 23%? Of a study that was supposed to settle the question. The Institute did not say the objects were extraterrestrial. It said the cases had not been explained, but the Air Force used the Condon Report to close Blue Book anyway. Therefore, the professional objection of the aerospace engineering community is not in the history books that most people read. It is in the technical journals, available, unread by most people who think the Condon Report was the final word. Hynek made similar objections. Physicist James McDonald of the University of Arizona spent years analyzing Blue Book cases and testified before Congress that the program had systematically mishandled the most important reports. McDonald called the Robertson Panel recommendation to debunk UFO sightings one of the most scientifically irresponsible decisions in modern American history. He said that trained scientists had been told to find conventional explanations rather than follow the evidence. He said the files contained cases that deserved serious investigation and had received none. He testified before a congressional committee in 1968, but Blue Book closed the following year. Therefore, the congressional record contains his testimony. The program ignored it. Part 17. The Modern Connection. The files at the National Archives are not a historical curiosity. They are a direct link to every investigation that followed. When the Department of Defense established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in 2022, the investigators who staffed it reviewed the Blue Book records as baseline historical data. When congressional researchers prepared the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, they referenced the Blue Book files as precedent for government documentation of unexplained aerial encounters. When former intelligence officials testified before Senate committees about programs that had run inside the government for decades, the Blue Book cases they referenced were the same cases that Hynek had marked unidentified and filed away between 1952 and 1969. The question did not end. It went underground. It moved into classified programs with different names and different budgets. But the foundation is Blue Book, the cases in the National Archives, the 701 folders. And Hynek is the through line. The man who spent 20 years inside the official program, watched it fail to do what it was supposed to do, built the independent institution that kept the question alive scientifically, and created the classification system that is still the standard language used by every serious researcher on the planet. The program said it found nothing. Hynek found something. He found that the question was real, that the evidence deserved better than it had received, and that the right response to an unexplained case was not to change the classification until it looked explained. It was to keep looking. The files are in Washington. They have been there since 1976. 701 cases, still open, still waiting. Go look.